Greetings! In this video I'll be painting an Assault Intercessor from the Angels of Absolution Chapter. For this mini I've gone with a Mark 10 Tacticus armor and a heavy chainsword or eviscerator with an up-armored left arm. I've also used a Mark 10 helmet with a respirator faceplate resembling the Mark 6 Corvus pattern helmet. I've had this model ready to paint for a while now and built even longer. When I built it, I didn't know I had any red close support tactical markings, so I went with a trimless pauldron with molecular bonding studs, which suits the Mark 6 styled helmet. I've 3D printed a number of components for this one, like the chapter armorial on the left pauldron. Some information about 3D printed parts is in the video description, as well as all the paints I've used. We're lucky to have some Imperial armor references for this chapter, showing some nice livery details that you don't normally see in other media. I'll be using these references from Imperial Armor Volume 7 as the primary source, but there is the 8th edition Codex version, which I've used for some colour choices like the weapon. I primed the model black, then followed with a grey Seer undercoat. This way I can apply the light base coat faster, and if you're following along you can use the grey Seer spray can from Citadel, or rather Warhammer Colour, whatever they're calling it now. My first step after priming and undercoating was to get the armour colour. I did some samples from the references and found Screaming Skull to be a close match. Wraithbone could work too, but I thought it was a bit pale, and the darker tones were, well, a bit dark. It took a few coats to get coverage, even over the grey. Next, I applied Abaddon black on the undersuit, the power pack, and the Imperialis on the torso. I'm doing this now as it's the hardest to reach bits. Getting base coats down and cleaning up later makes for faster application, as long as you're going thin enough. Now onto the leather, starting with a base coat of Rhinox hide. The belt and pouches receive 2 thin layers to get full coverage. Next, I switched to Mournfang brown and began building up some definition by thinly applying paint towards the bottom of each pouch, with some scratches going along the surface. A tiny bit of water mixed into the paint, then touching the brush on an absorbent material like paper towel or kitchen roll, makes this go on really quick and easy. Finally, I used some Steel Legion Drab to do some small scratches over the previous coat, to add some additional depth. Now for the chainsword casing. I used some Mephiston red and simply base coated the casing section. Now onto the markings, starting with Ulthuan grey for the skull on their chapter armorial, as well as the halved section for the knee. I used some dots where I thought the centre should be, then filled the rest in. Now moving over to Corvus black, used to paint in the wing on the chapter armorial and the entirety of the Imperialis and the power pack, as well as placing a few dots over the knee to start mapping out the company marking. The dots were used to form a grid which helped me paint in the checkerboard pattern a bit easier. This pattern indicates 5th company. This is the first time I've done a checkerboard pattern from scratch. I've only extended checkerboard decals in the past, so I'm fairly happy with this outcome, even if it's a bit off. Now for a bunch of the green details, starting with Lupercal green as a base coat for the eye lenses. Vulkan green followed, applied as a base coat for the chainsword handle. Kabalite green was next, applied in a smaller area in the eye lenses. Next was Sunz of Horus green, applied as a highlight for the more exposed edges of the chainsword handle. Finally, Sybarite green was used to paint in a thin highlight on the eye lenses. Continuing with highlighting, I switched it over to Evil Sunz Scarlet and highlighted the weapon casing. This looks really nice in real life, but the camera colour profile struggles to show a distinction between the two paints. The other profiles I've tried make every other colour worse, so it's a shame, but not much can be done with the camera I've got. Dark Reaper was next, highlighting the power pack and the Imperialis on the torso. This was mostly an edge highlight, but some other smoother sections that I felt needed to be brighter were also painted in. With most of the colours done around the model, I switched back to Screaming Skull to clean up anywhere that needed fixing. I then switched to Wraithbone to edge highlight all of the cream armour. This is super faint, even in real life, but I can't go any brighter without mixing some white in. Besides simple edge highlights, a few scratches are also painted, as well as a light layering effect. I'm not sure what to call it. It's where you go over raised bits that aren't edges, and yeah, anyway, it's not really noticeable, but it does brighten up the overall model when it's done. I then used some gloss varnish on the other knee pad, the left greave, and a little spot on the pauldron with the molecular bonding studs, in preparation for decals. I put a campaign badge on the greave, a squad ordinal on the other knee, and some text on the pauldron. Now for the metallics. I used gunmetal grey for the steel bits, namely the chainsword teeth and housing and any power pack or armour details around the model. Duraluminium followed as the highlight colour. This was again applied over raised surfaces and along edges. It was particularly satisfying painting in each of the little chainsword teeth. I switched back to Corvus Black, noticing how dark the campaign badge was in comparison to the knee pad. A quick but precise application fixed that up. Now for the weathering, starting with a bunch of scratches and cuts with Rhinox hide. Doing little dots around the scratches helps sell the effect as well. If you feel brave enough, you can try a little dry brushing around the edges to get an even nicer effect. Just make sure it's dry enough, otherwise you get like a smudgy effect. With the raised bits highlighted and weathered, the recesses look really out of place. This Sepia enamel Paneliner works well to darken those recesses, but with such a light armour like this one, it can stain the armour too much. We can clean that up in the next step. I used some enamel thinners on a cotton tip, and lightly removed where I thought the effect was too thick. The Paneliner dries very quick, but you do have a few hours before it's too dry to remove. Other enamel paints tend to have a much longer curing time. If you wait too long with this one, it may get a bit difficult to remove. After I gave it a few hours to cure enough, I applied my usual basing method, painted the base rim black, and then sealed everything in with some ultramatte varnish. And here we have it, an Assault Intercessor from the Angels of Absolution Chapter. I thought this mini was going to be a bit boring, the basic bone colour with black, but I was surprised how happy I was when I saw how the piece was coming together. It might not be the flashiest paint scheme, but I did enjoy this one. I've done a similar scheme in the past, but my painting skill is slowly getting better. Seeing this one compared to the older videos really helps put that progression in perspective. I think the best thing to take away from this is taking pictures or something of the stuff you've done, and then comparing it to the stuff you do in a year or so. It can be really helpful when you think you're stuck somewhere. Sticking with that idea, looking for things to improve on is the only way I can get better. I think the main weaknesses for this model, and some of the others I do, are the eyes, the 3D printing I rely on for decals, and painting black armour. The eyes here are a bit too dark. It looks cool, but I wanted them to stand out as a green more. To remedy this, I could paint over the enamel and just lighten it up a bit. The chapter armorial has a noticeable edge on some of the examples I do. I find it annoying, but ultimately it's better than me trying to freehand it. Not sure what I can do differently here, beyond painting the edge of the surface more carefully. Or of course, freehanding them, but I'm not there yet. For the black armour, well, I can do it right sometimes, I'm just not sure how I can get it to look right consistently. but what do you guys think? If you have any chapter requests, let me know in the comments. Certain types of units within those chapters may be doable as well, but it may depend on the accessibility to required parts or how I interpret the lore for any given chapter. For example, I'm not a fan of giving the Ultramarines those Roman-styled helmets. But anyway, that's all I've got for this video. Hope you stick around for the next one.